we'll do the live thing first. Like, hey everybody, welcome back to the Bigmark podcast. It's me, your host, Bigmark. If it's your first time watching, welcome. If not, welcome back. Like I always say, if you like the podcast, please tell a friend. If you tell one friend, we'll double the podcast overnight. If you ever want to reach out to the podcast, hit us up on our DMs at the Bigmark Pod or at the Bigmark Podcast on our Twitter or Instagram. Hit our Patreon, patreon.com/thebigmarkpod. And if you're watching on YouTube, hit that like and subscribe button so you know when our next video comes out. And that brings me to my next point. I got a lot of things on my mind today, so just give me a break. Most of today's video is not going to be on the video. It's going to be mostly audio, so if you're listening, no big deal. But if not, if you're watching on YouTube, you won't be seeing my face for much longer. Anyway, enjoy this episode. It's really fun. I had a lot of fun in recording it. Well, just the audio anyway. But anyway, enjoy. Today's episode is on a little show that I fell in love with in university. I think I watched it for the first time back then, but it was kind of one of those shows where when it was on TV, I really had no idea what it was about. So, the show aired in 2004, and so I was like 13. I just wasn't really into it. And, you know, it shows a lot, you know, it was a lot of different kind of things. I really don't know why I didn't watch it, to be truthfully honest. It must have been on some channel up here in Canada, but I guess I was just into like Kenny versus Spenny and stuff back then. But the show I'm talking about today is Lost. If you haven't seen it before, check it out. Really, really cool show. So if you haven't seen it before, you might not want to continue to watch this episode or listen to this episode because, yeah, there's going to be some spoilies. Kind of wanted to take a different approach with this one. Like, you know, this one kind of goes out to people who've seen the show and appreciate it, or, you know, are kind of on the fence about it, haven't really watched it, and, you know, maybe, you know, learning a little bit about the synopsis, because, you know, I'm going to kind of give it, you know, a detailed approach, but I can't give everything away. You got to watch it. And the thing about Lost is one of those shows that when you actually watch it, it just, like, especially the first time you watch this, maybe not the best show to rewatch, I will admit, unless you give yourself like a lot of time in between. But the first time you watch it, you get so locked into it. And maybe this doesn't go for everyone, but this is my experience anyway. I got so locked into it, and the twists and turns, and like you're like thinking about it after. And I remember going up to Huntsville at one point, and I was like in the bush with the boys or whatever. We were chilling. And I remember I was like like balls deep in the show, like for the first time watching it, and like, you know, the forest was tripping me out. I'm like, oh shit, like, you know, where are the others and everything. I also watched the Office before I watched this, and there's a scene where Dwight, you know, he's talking to the camera, and they're like going down to see the warehouse staff, and, you know, Dwight's talking about, remember that scene in Lost where they meet the others? And I never really understood that line. I understand it in the context of The Office, but, you know, there was a bunch of scenes where like they all kind of meet, and anyway, super interesting. Excuse me. So like I said, you know, it aired from 2004 and from 2004 to 2010. So there's 6 seasons. It won an Emmy for Best Show. And, you know, like I said today, I kind of want to take a little bit of different approach. I know when I like to go over kind of some of the TV shows and movies that we've talked about on the podcast, sometimes I kind of like to go a little bit, not only into a little bit of the storyline, but I also kind of like to talk about, of course, like, you know, the behind the scenes and the actors and the actresses and cool stories about the making and all that stuff. And, you know, all that stuff kind of comes from like the albums and a lot of stuff that I've talked about already. But I kind of wanted to take a little bit of a different approach today, and that approach today was going to be a little bit to talk a little bit more about the actual happenings on the show, because for a few reasons, I only know so much kind of about the behind the scenes, and in my research I found a lot more. But what I love about the show is the show itself, the plot and everything, and like I said, where the show takes you, because yeah, maybe sometimes it's gratuitous, but where the emotional roller coaster the show takes you on is quite fun. So there's kind of like 14 main characters, 14 quite a bit, and honestly that's barely scratching the surface as far as like actual like the amount of characters on the show as well. It's like War and Peace almost. There's like they're constantly adding characters. Anyway, one of the main characters, Jack Shepherd, played by Matthew Fox. Shout out Matthew Fox. He was great in We Are Marshall, one of the first movies that like I almost like fucking had a breakdown because I watched it in first year, and it's all about a plane crash of a university football team, and I was like, this is too fucking close to home. Kate Austin, great character. She's kind of like a badass. With Jack Shepherd, doctor, surgeon, he's kind of the leader of the show. Makes sense. Kate Austin's kind of this badass, convict chick, played by Evangeline Lilly, who is a piece. Hugo Reyes is amazing in the show. Really cool character. The lovable kind of comedic guy, played by Jorge Garcia. He does an excellent job. John Ford, or Sawyer, played by Josh Holloway. Sawyer's a great character. He's kind of smooth talking Southern kind of dude, con man. Boone Carlisle, classic, played by Ian Somerhalder, that looks just like my friend Selena's husband. He is a really interesting character, Boone. Him and his sister Shannon Rutherford, I guess I think half sister or stepsister in the show. They kind of explain it a little bit more. Really interesting dynamic there. She's played by Maggie Grace. Michael Dawson is a very interesting character in the show. I'd say somewhat derisive, but he's played by Harold Perrineau, who was I always forget his character's name in Romeo and Juliet. Mercutio, I think. Tremendous actor, and he did a really good job playing Michael, who again was kind of like, there was some times where his behavior was questionable at best. And Michael Dawson's son Walt, who's a really interesting character in the show as well. He kind of becomes a little bit sporadic near the end, played by Michael David Kelly. John Locke, who is probably one of TV or movies' greatest villains. He does an excellent job, played by Terry O'Quinn. It's a really very, conniving, smart, capable, skilled character who is like, it's the way the show is too, and it really does kind of, it's written this way. John Locke's character is kind of like, you don't really know if he's the bad guy or not. There's a lot of decisions, that come up in the plot where you kind of can't argue with him so much, even though maybe he's going against the will of Jack or some of the other main characters. So again, it's kind of a show where it probably spoke to a lot of people, not to take too far away from the storyline of it, but it probably spoke to a lot of people in a sense where there was like so many different storylines, so many different characters that would have their kind of moments in the sun that you almost kind of latched on to one of the characters and kind of like followed them a little bit more, and amongst everyone it was almost a every man for themselves situation, that you kind of had one person to root for, maybe a couple people that you liked, and then it was like very cool in the sense that it probably spoke to a lot of people that way. Anyway, another character, Saeed Jarrah, tremendous. He was a former Republican guard, which is cool how he's kind of in the mix with the rest of the characters. Played by Naveen Andrews. He does a great job. Claire Littleton, played by Emily DeVervine. She's really cool. Claire is an interesting character. She's pregnant at the time that the show starts, and she has a baby during the course of the show. Sun Quan and Jin Quan, amazing, played by Young Jin Kim and Daniel Day Kim. They're a married couple. And then Charlie Pace, played by Dominic Moynihan from Lord of the Rings fame, is a sweet rock star. And I guess some of this doesn't make sense right now because the plot would make it a little bit more sense to kind of talk about. So, the show starts. If you haven't seen the show, again, like I said, you probably haven't listened this far if you haven't seen the show. So if you've seen the show, you probably know all these characters I'm talking about so far. But what brings all these characters together and how the first season starts is right after the aftermath of a plane crash, the crash of United Airlines Flight 815, crashes on a seemingly uninhabited island. Panic is ensuing. People are injured. Jack Shepherd, obviously being the surgeon that he is hopping to and saving people. And it's really interesting how his character instantly becomes kind of a leader. Again, being a doctor, having the knowledge, having the skill, a surgeon for that matter, and like being able to kind of like control the room and tell people what to do. Again, makes him a natural born leader in these circumstances. And it's really interesting, and the show really touches, the plot really touches upon this, is that he doesn't really want to be the leader per se. He happens to be a doctor. He happens to have the skills. And again, the show touches on it. It's like, well, guess what, sucker? You are the leader because you do have the skills, and this is how it is. And it's life and death right now. No one knows what's going on. Everyone's past is erased. It's a fresh start on this island. No one knows anybody. We're all on this island, or not no one, but like only a few people know each other. But all in all, we're all strangers, and it doesn't matter who you are or who you think you are. Right now, you're the man, and it goes for everyone. There's the man, there's the badass, there's the the damsel in distress, and the strong. Like there's such a varying like. The varying roles that emerge in those emergency situations are filled. And I guess the showrunners and the writers did a great job of capturing that. There was about 70 survivors. Jack, like I said, becomes the de facto leader. And basically, for most of season 1, the survivors are kind of battling like a multitude of like mysteries in general. It's kind of just confusion and twists and turns. There's this like black smoke monster that kind of comes out of the woodwork. There's polar bears. There's wild shit going on where again, it's when you're watching it for the first time, your head is just fucking spinning like a top because you're just on for this ride of where all this shit is happening. And again, it's supposed to disorient you, supposed to kind of throw you off kilter. They run into this woman who had they thought it was empty, and they run into this lady who had been on the island for like 16 years. They realize there's like the others, like this other group of people that happen to be on the island. And then John Locke finds the hatch, which, as far as like TV plots go, man, the first time I saw it, I was just fucking floored the way that this, it's this mysterious hatch that they find in the fucking middle of the jungle, and you don't know what's going on. And again, it's just like this show, it's just meant to just keep you on your heels, and they don't know, they're banging and they're trying to open it. There's no handle, but there's a light. And one of the sweetest scenes is right at the end. I don't know if it's the finale. If it's the finale, that it would be sick, but I can't remember. But one of the last episodes of season 1, there's a scene where John is just banging on this hatch and he's just screaming at the heavens for a sign of, all this work he's doing. And all of a sudden a light turns on inside and it just shines out, and it's really cool. And again, when you're experiencing it for the first time, it is such a ride. And that leads us into season 2, which more or less was kind of a story of faith versus science, with a little bit more exploring of the island. They actually realize that there's people that survived in the tail section of the plane too. So there's this whole other group of people. They all kind of coalesce again as the survivors, and it becomes this kind of John Locke versus Jack battle for control, battle for supremacy. I don't know. I think it rarely came to blows or physicality, but again, it was kind of the choice of John Locke being like, we got this hatch, there's, what are you going to do? Are you going to try and hunker down and live on the island because you're there now, where John's like, this island provides everything you need? And then Jack's going, listen, we're still trying to get rescued here. We're not trying to live here like full time. Obviously on the plane, people pack guns. There was a Sky Marshal, there was a U.S. Marshal on the plane with Kate. There's gun. There is a gun at least. There's knives and shit. There's medicine, and Sawyer has it at one point, and John's trying to get a hold of it. Jack's trying to get a hold of it, obviously, and it's just, again, they're vying for kind of control here. At one point, they kind of find like a little cave area where they can chill, and some people are kind of going like, "Yo, like, why are we going inland?" It's just like, again, it kind of presents with some relatively real ideas that make sense in like a survival scenario. Now, that being said, let's go back to the hatch, because inside the hatch, which they finally managed to open, is this dude named Desmond. And Desmond has been down there for time, pressing a button every 108 minutes, entering the numbers 4, 8, 15, 16, 23, and 42, so that they can dissipate some kind of electromagnetic force so that the world doesn't explode. It's wild, man. Takes you on a ride. And I'm telling you, again, if you've listened this far, I hope I haven't spoiled anything for you. They go on to learn about the Dharma Initiative, which is a scientific research project where there's all these crazy videos of instructions of how to do things, this and that. And then they're sending notes here and there. It's wild. At one point, Mike betrays the crew because he's trying to find his son, because the others steal Walt at one point. And now he's trying to find his son. So then he's fucking shooting people, and he shoots. That's when he shoots Libby, which is a fucking bummer. She was a babe from the tail section that Hugo was macking. He's trying to take her out on a date. It's pretty sad, but Mike takes off on a boat, which is wild. And then John Locke smashes the computer in a fitful rage, and there's a giant electromagnetic event, and it kind of shakes everything up, so to speak. Anyway, essentially what happens is it's the same electromagnetic event that also made their fucking plane crash. Not the same one, but like one similar to, which at one point Desmond didn't fucking put the number in because he got all fucking drunk and was like going off. But I digress. So that takes us into season 3, where things do get a little squirrely. It's a little bit more focused on the others, the people who are kind of already on the island, the native people of the island, and kind of what happened with the Dharma Initiative, which again was like, based kind of in the 60s. It kind of had like this interesting cult vibe, but, it was kind of, this scientific research project on this island that apparently has these strange electromagnetic properties. And there's all kinds of like bases and different like labs and shit, like the Swan. One's called the Swan, one's called the Lighthouse, I think, or something like that. Hydra stations, they're called. They're all called stations. The Pearl. And one of the dudes, Benjamin Linus, who is another tremendous villain in movie history. He's played by Michael Emerson. He comes into the picture because he at one point was with the Dharma Initiative and then ends up killing his own father and then joining the others. So, cool guy, obviously bad dude. again, in this season, it's a little bit wild. So there's a lot of time travel. Time travel gets introduced. That's all I'm going to say. There's time travel gets introduced. Desmond Hume, my boy, gets sent 8 years into the past when that electromagnetic event happens. And when he returns back to the present, he can see the future. So, again, season 3, we're rocking and rolling with some time travel. The electromagnetic event sent a signal also into the fucking, stratosphere that Desmond's ex-girlfriend picks up. Her name's Penelope. She has been looking for Desmond for years because they had a shitty breakup and she misses him. And right during this whole event where John smashes the computer and Desmond gets sent into the past and then comes back, there's this boat that shows up on the island, and there's this woman who is kind of like was a scout from the boat. Like, she came and she crashed her helicopter or something like that, and she was, they said that they were looking for Penny, which is Desmond's ex-girlfriend. So everything was fishy, or people were kind of like, whatever. And then so they figure out that it's this Penny girl and she's been looking for Desmond and that she sent this boat. And they all think that she sent this boat. And then our boy Charlie, and remember, Desmond can see into the future at this point. So there's all this shit going on and he's being really weird around Charlie this whole time. And he ends up confessing to Charlie. He says, man, like, I can see in the future, mate. Like, he's fucking Scottish as fuck. And he's like, I'll see you in another life, brother. But he's like, I know how you're going to die, mate. And like, brother, I don't want to see it go. And, finally Charlie's just like, fuck off, mate. Like, I'm going down. Like, I'm, these couple wankers just fucking going off. But he's like, I don't care. If I have to die, I'm going to die. And in his last fit, the one underwater Dharma station that's still active, they go down to, and they're talking to the boat, and Charlie actually gets in touch with Penelope, and they're talking, and she says, "Oh, that's not my boat." So everyone's fucking tripping. Again, another trippy ass part in the show. And then Charlie manages to write "not Penny's boat" on his hand. Well, he's sinking underwater and there's a fucking grenade involved and all this shit. And he shows Desmond not Penny's boat. So that was fucking a sweet ending to season 3. Which takes us into, which would have been crazy again. I watched these in, let's say 2012. I watched these like at the latest. So this show is long gone. This episode especially was long aired. And when I was watching it, I didn't have to wait months and months in between seasons. So I couldn't imagine waiting after seeing Not Penny's Boat and all the shit that happens in that season, and that I have to wait for the next season. So the next season, the freighter that's not Penny's was actually full of people trying to reclaim the island from Ben. So there's this old dude that was involved with the others way back in the day and the early Dharma Initiative shit. And he's trying to get the boat back, and he also happens to be Penny's dad. So fucking suck on that one. There's a lot of flash forwards in this season, which is super interesting. At the end of season 3, or sorry, I should say that the same boat, like I said, the freighter that's not Penny's. That was there at the end of season 3, they end up kind of like taking it back, and they fight all these guys and everyone gets shot. And then six of the survivors actually get rescued and get taken back to, the real like mainland from the island. Jack, Kate, with Aaron, who is Claire's kid, but she went loony and she's with the French woman. Hurley, Saeed, and Sun. So the 6 of them go back. Sun, thinks Jin is dead, which sucks. And then Ben goes to see Jacob, the guy who runs the island, and he basically tells Ben to move the island. And there's a way that they do that kind of with the electromagnetic doings. And again, there's people still back on the island that didn't leave. So this Oceanic 6. So again, that kind of was a long season 4, where it's kind of like, it's a drawn out story there. And then season 5, things kind of get juicy again. Because Ben moves the island, everyone who's kind of left that didn't get to go back are going through like crazy erratic time shifts. They're going forward and backward in time. John Locke is still there, and he gets told by one of the people during one of the time shifts to return, go get the 6 people who left and bring them back to the island to save the island, to make sure it stops, I guess, running through time, all this shit. When John ends up leaving the island, he stops. That's when the time shift stops. And the remaining survivors that were there are stuck in 1974. Now, 1974 isn't too bad because that's when the Dharma Initiative is ripping on the island right now. So, meanwhile, flash forward again from 1974 to the present. John is still trying to bring everyone back to the island. And they end up all getting on a flight that's destined to crash. It's supposed to crash on the island. And when they come in, the pilot actually ends up landing the plane, but half of the 6 go to 1977 and the rest land in 2007. So again, there's crazy magnetic events happening. The survivors in 77 actually end up having to detonate a nuclear bomb to reset time, and that's where Daniel Faraday comes into play. So Daniel Faraday is this really interesting character that always talks like this. He's always whispering, and he always has something so important to say, but you have to listen to him very carefully because he's not going to say it very loud. Anyway, and he's like some nuclear physicist, and his mom was one of the others, and some trippy shit was going down. And anyway, he ends up figuring out that if you detonate a nuclear bomb next to this thing, it kind of like does this big reset. So long story short, they end up detonating this nuclear bomb, big time reset. Season 5 is actually pretty good. There's some really cool stories. I know I'm kind of glossing over a few things here, but it's kind of hard to tell some things and not go into them too in depth. So again, check the show out. If you've seen the show already, which you probably have if you listened this far, go check it out again, man. It's amazing. It still holds up. It's a really fun, really, really, really fun watch. So again, at the beginning of season 6, Jacob, who is like the keeper of the island, gets killed by the Man in Black, which is his evil twin brother, who is also the human alter ego of the Black Smoke Monster. He inhabits John Locke's body, and he becomes set on leaving the island. And essentially, what we find out is that if he leaves the island, there's like essentially the island is like this weird like cork in the bottle of evil. So if we lose the island or whatever, evil can come loose. So season 6, the wheels come off a little bit. You know what? Whatever. It's okay. It was the last season. And again, not to go too tangential here right now, but my thing is that I think the showrunners, or at least the writers, when they first started the show, they probably thought it wasn't really going to go much past season 2. I feel like they maybe had the first 2 seasons kind of figured out. And again, it was just kind of one of those things where they were making wild decisions, not ever really thinking that the show was ever going to make it. And they were just going to be able to just do anything they wanted and never have to answer to anyone. But sadly, when you have to wrap up a show and do the last season, sometimes you got to pay the piper. So again, when the Man in Black escapes the island, it basically creates this battle of good versus evil. While all this is happening, there's also these they're not flashbacks, they're not flash forwards, they're kind of flash sideways to this timeline that basically shows all the survivors' lives if they never crashed. So it's this whole idea that, maybe something happened, maybe they reset something and no one ever got on the plane and then therefore never crashed and they were never on the island. Turns out that Jacob actually was around and shifting things in all their lives, throughout all their lives, to bring them all to the island to kind of determine the next caretaker of the island. Why someone needs to take care of the island, who knows, right? It's an island. But it's got electromagnetic properties. Jack ends up battling the Man in Black, and the Man in Black gets killed. Actually, Kate kills the Man in Black, but Jack gets mortally wounded. And then Hurley takes over the island, so he becomes a caretaker, which he's an amazing kind of dark horse there. Shout out Lost. It was the dark horse winner before Game of Thrones. Fuck you, King Brand or whatever. Jack dies in the same spot where the show started, which is really interesting, to kind of, again, step back a little bit from the storyline here. Really cool thing that the writers did do. And, the opening sequence of the show is Jack, awakening in this bamboo forest. And then the last time you see Jack alive is, him dying in the same forest. And then at the very end, the whole cast reunites in a church. And they kind of all move on together. So it shows that flash sideways thing was like a purgatory type scenario before they're going to this church type scenario. And then there's all types of other scenarios in the scenario of the scenarian. But there's some churchy vibes. It's real gaudy, GODD. So, it's an interesting kind of wrap up, which I wouldn't say, ruins the whole show at all. I mean, it just, it is the way that they wanted to wrap it up. And, maybe they all died, I guess the question remains, maybe they just all died in the plane crash and basically the whole show happened, in their minds, or, again, it leaves a lot of things up to speculation, actually, if you really think about it. Right. And, again, yeah, maybe it was kind of that's heaven and, they just went through their whole purgatory thing, or maybe some people kind of went to hell, or who knows. Right. So, again, super interesting show. One of the things I thought that was super fascinating was, again, it came out, in 2004, and Castaway had come out in 2000. Survivor was really big. The show Survivor, the reality show, I think is still on to this day, in fact. But those were really, really huge. And it kind of got me wondering, why did we get so obsessed with, desert island things and, surviving and living through hardships and stuff like that? It's because we were going through some fucking shit back then, man. Early 2000s. Are you fucking kidding me? I know Castaway came out in 2000 before 9/11 and all that shit. But again, it kind of marked that the world was already going through some type of crisis. And then, the fucking shit that went down in New York City, really kind of pushed people over the edge in a way where we maybe felt that we were all on an island. And, it's almost interesting now. I wonder if some art, or there might be a new TV show that might come out soon where everyone's on an island, where that's what we fucking felt during COVID. Everyone's on an island and you can't go see anybody, and you're going through trials and tribulations, and then at the end, maybe it's all in your head. No. Again, just really interesting how, people, we get fascinated by certain things, and our generations, get, you look back far enough and they're really interested in, conquering worlds and, stories of that and stories of old and telling tales of that. And then we're starting to get into trying to predict the future. And again, there's so many different stories where art reflects, life, and life reflects art in that sense. And I think, it's an interesting thing how people can kind of get into that theme of isolation and perseverance. But at the end, you always come back to something, right? At the end of Survivor, you win $1 million. At the end of Castaway, he makes it home. And then the Lost, they're all in the church. So again, interesting thought. Take that home and think it through. Thank you so much for listening. If you want to reach out to us at any time, check out our DMs at the Bigmark Pod, at the Bigmark Podcast. If you ever wanted to donate to the podcast, check out our Patreon, patreon.com/thebigmarkpod. Give us a 5-star review if you like the podcast. Hit that like and notifications and subscribe to the channel if you're watching on YouTube. And yeah, if you like the podcast, tell your friends. If you tell one friend, we can double the podcast overnight. Again, thank you so much for listening. I love you all. We'll see you soon. Shannon!